Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited to tell you about my grandpa. I was just down visiting my grandfather in Oklahoma City in August, and my grandma and grandpa are still alive, very healthy. My grandfather was born in 1930, so to do some quick math, he's old. He was complaining, just to give you context of who this gentleman is, he was complaining that his split time was down on his daily run. So I don't know what your split times are on your daily 5-mile run. When you're born in 1930, but he was really depressed because his is now are at the slow pace of a 9-minute mile. He's really, really bummed. He was honestly hurt that he was down to a slow 9-minute mile. I encourage you to go try and run 5 miles at 9 minutes a mile and keep my grandfather in mind. Anyhow, he's an interesting character, and I always take the time, for about the last decade, I've taken the time to, when I'm down there, I don't go horse around in Oklahoma City and see all the cool stuff. I sit at the table and I ask my grandparents as many questions as I can, because someday they're going to be gone. And I'll get a bunch of photos like family members do, and I'm going to want to know what these photos are about. Who is this person? So I'm just pepper them with questions. And so on a Saturday morning, I'm sitting at the table. We're finishing a traditional Oklahoma breakfast, which for my grandma is like 2 tubes of biscuits, a full thing of hash browns, a dozen eggs, a full package of bacon, a ham steak. You know, she's a good Okie. She's going to fatten you up in the first 20 minutes. And so I started asking my grandfather some questions, like we've always done. And I just have thousands of questions for him. His name is Bert. Is that not a great name for being born in 1930? Bert Brown. And so we're sitting there at the table talking about, who knows what. And I've had this project that I've been working on for a while, and then they asked me to present, and I thought, well, I'm gonna start gathering some just fun family data here. So I asked my grandfather this question. I said, talk to me about what national news was like when you were a kid. Right, so I'm finishing my iced tea because in Oklahoma you have to drink sweet tea with breakfast too. And he's, finishing pushing his eggs around the plate. And he said, national news? I never even heard of that until I was an adult. The only thing that I would have gotten as national news is when Pearl Harbor was bombed and when the president was elected. And I thought, man, that is a different world than I live in. Right, I can't escape national news. I want like a national news diet where I could go someplace and not hear the national news. And he says, I really only have 2 memories, and that's Pearl Harbor. It was a big deal to us, as you can imagine, and when the president was elected. And I said, well, how in the world did you get the national news? He grew up in western Oklahoma. If you go to Sweetwater, Oklahoma, which is still there, there's still the same 12 houses that were there in 1930. He said, well, we got the paper. We got a radio when I was a little bit older. And I remember, I'm not that old, but I remember seeing where people would go to the movies and see like war reels, but they didn't have movie theaters out in western Oklahoma. So he said, we just got the paper. And I said, well, how did you get the paper? He said, how often did you get the paper? He said, it came every Sunday. They just would fly over the house and throw it on the porch. And then we would read the paper. And I go, wait a second. What do you mean they fly over the house and you get the paper? And he said, well, yeah, they use a top-wing crop duster to deliver our Sunday paper. And I'm like, no, what? What are you talking about? They use an airplane. So he said, yeah, they would, he said, yep, he just like a paper route. He just would lower the window and throw it on our porch. Duh, So I turn to my grandma who's in the kitchen, aproned up, and I go, Grandma, help me out here. Grandpa's saying, I know he's getting old, I don't think he's senile, he's saying he got the paper delivered by airplane. She goes, oh yeah, same guy delivered ours about 15 miles south. And I'm like, well, how high is someone flying? You think about that for a second. How high is someone flying that they can deliver your paper right to your porch? She said, well, his wings came really close to the housetops. What? What kind of awesome environment childhood did my grandparents have where their Sunday paper got delivered by airplane? She said the service was so much better. She said, honestly, they could throw the paper right on the porch. You could open the door and get the paper. And she's mad now because she has to walk to the end of the driveway to get the paper. We've gotten lazy. It comes by Uber, I'm sure, and she hates it. And so this is an actual plane that would have been used in that time period to deliver the news. Deliver their newspaper by airplane. So I thought this is a great opportunity to ask other questions because we've clearly opened the weird can of worms with Grandma and Grandpa. So I started asking some more questions. I said, I got another question for you, because I'm noodling this stuff all the time. I said, Grandpa, how many people do you think that you met from birth until the age of 18? Think about that for a second. How many people did you meet? He gave a long pause, and he said, you mean including like school children and people at church and local farmers? I said, yeah, everybody. Now, his family owned the singular gas station in the county. So his chances of meeting humans from a county standpoint out there in Western Oklahoma would have been higher, because if you bought fuel, you bought it from our family out there. He said, well, can I also include the people who did custom combining that would come through each year? Sure, Grandpa. Include the combiners. He said, it's probably upwards of 150. 150. In the first 18 years of your life, you met 150 humans. There's more of 150 of you here. I could shake all of your hands during break time and cross off in 20 minutes what took him 18 years. So I thought, there's like just 2 generations. We have such different environment. First of all, he gets his paper by airplane, and he's only met 150 humans. I said, okay, let's switch gears to food. How many different ingredients, how many different types of food did you try before you moved out? And he moved out when he was 18. He married my grandma. She was still in high school. They're that generation, those farm kids that got married young. He said, well, I don't know. So he takes his pen that my grandma has out to do the crossword. She's one of those that does the crossword in pen and gets it right every paper. You know, she just like knows every word in trivia ever. And so he writes down, he's there scribbling, and he's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like about 15. 15 ingredients, right? 15 ingredients. And it's just like chicken, eggs, milk, cream. And so he confirms with my grandma, they can, in total, come up with 15 ingredients. They made up every dish they ever had at a church potluck or at their grandma's house. And I'm just like, every piece of data in your childhood is so much different than mine. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about worldviews. How many different worldviews were you exposed to as a kid? He said, I don't know what you're talking about, worldviews. And I said, like this set of morals, that set of values. He goes, oh, easy, there were 2, Methodist and Baptist. He said, I never heard of anything else until I moved to the big city. Okay. How about politics? How many different political viewpoints? And he said, just one. We were all Democrat because Eisenhower saved all of us. You think about the difference that is compared to my children. I have 4 kiddos. I don't know if you heard the intro, but it said I'm always looking for my keys. That's true because I have 4 kids. I went to get my wallet. Here's what's left of my wallet this morning, a Josiah's gift card and my debit card. So somewhere is my driver's license and health insurance and the chaos of little kids, right? So compared to my children, what my grandfather grew up was quite different. Here's what I included. I forgot to show you. Here's a picture of the grocery store my grandfather would have gone to get his 12 ingredients. It's pretty awesome. That is the actual grocery store. How different is just 2 generations or 3 generations of experience that we're growing up in? His exposure to all these things was so different. So let's dive in. Let's just look at a normal day for my kids and see if we can find some differences. So I live in the district where my kids go to Harrisburg North. So I thought, let's just jump on it and do the food school menu. So for breakfast options, this was last 2 weeks. I don't know whenever you guys wanted the slide presentation. Breakfast pizza at school was the breakfast option. There's 15 ingredients, included spices and preservatives. Oh, spices. One more. I asked my grandfather how many different spices was he exposed to, and he said he never heard of the term spices. They only had salt and pepper. So different options there. And I lost my monitors up here, guys. So breakfast pizza at school, about 15 different ingredients from what I can tell, and some orange juice. For lunch, we'll do a deep dive here. For lunch, it was sweet and sassy barbecue rib sandwich. Sounds McRibbish to me. And best I can tell about is 100 different ingredients. So let's deep dive into what's in our barbecue sandwich for my kiddos. The barbecue sauce is 2 cups of ketchup, a half a cup of apple cider. There's some brown sugar, honey, Worcestershire sauce, lemon juice, and some seasoning. And if you're zesty, you could throw a little hot sauce in there. So let's deep dive in. So that's what's in barbecue sauce. Mind you, this is one sandwich, right? So let's just jump into ketchup. What is in ketchup? We've got, of course, when they have to tell you, this is from the back of a ketchup bottle, when they have to tell you they're red, ripe tomatoes, you get really nervous about the quotations. Distilled vinegar. Let's see here. We got some high fructose corn syrup, and then corn syrup, because that's not enough. Salt, onion powder, spices, and natural flavor. Sounds pretty reasonable. If you didn't know, this is what's in ketchup. So we're now within one ingredient within one sandwich, right? Are you tracking with me? We took the sandwich, we went to the barbecue sauce, we were now inside the ketchup. Let's jump in down here to, let's see, we got one more. Oh, natural flavor. Now this is a fun one. Let's jump into natural flavor. So I had to go to the FDA site to figure out what in the hell is natural flavor. This is the verbatim FDA, US FDA. It's essential oil, and it's all this stuff. It's pretty much anything from fruit, anything from vegetable, anything herb, any bark, bud, root, leaf, or similar plant material, any meat, any seafood, any poultry, any eggs, any dairy products, or things that might ferment. Pretty much any other thing on planet Earth, you can throw in your food and call it natural flavorings. If you're ever wondering, check out how many things you eat that have natural flavorings. So if you're allergic to anything on planet Earth, it's in natural flavorings. Always avoid that. So this is the one ingredient inside the one ingredient inside the one ingredient inside the one sandwich my kids had at lunch. This feels different to me than my grandpa's 12 ingredients. Let's look at my kids' social inputs. How many of you have children? Okay, I have a 3, a 7, 11, and a 13-year-old. 11 and 13-year-olds are absolute professional PhD level consumers of everything, social media, right, and what's going on their phones, which my kids don't have phones. They have my old dead phone that now just does Wi-Fi, right? But they are on things like Instagram and Snapchat or YouTube, mostly YouTube for the younger kids, and they get a lot of social inputs. How many different worldviews are my 11 and 13-year-old exposed to just by doing this? Right? On average, we see about 150 posts every time we log on to any platform. All of us. LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. We see about 150. How many different kids do my kids see at school, and teachers do they interact with, and at Taekwondo, and at church, and in the neighborhood? Their social exposure is high. Distinctly higher than my grandfather's 2 worldviews of Methodists and Baptists, 1 worldview of politics. I'm not saying the way Grandpa did it was right. That was just all he knew. But it's changed. Holy smokes, has it changed. So I thought, just for the fun of it, for those of you who aren't on Snapchat, if you've ever done the very dangerous activity of looking at your news feed on Snapchat, it looks something like this. These are actual screenshots from my Snapchat. I have no idea how they pick news. I don't know how it works. It doesn't seem very newsworthy to me. How are my kids supposed to decipher this? How are you supposed to decipher this? If this is the platform and my kids go, news, swipe, and it looks like that, try explaining this to your grandfather. There's just a lot happening right here that's really challenging. You can never explain the bathroom selfie to a grandparent. That makes no sense. This is just stuff. I don't even follow these channels. I don't even know what these things are. I've never even heard of any of these, so I try to not go look at the news feed. Usually I'm just seeing my kids and what they're doing and what's funny. My question is, have we evolved to handle this? Like, if you look throughout all of history until very recently, it hasn't changed those exposure. My grandpa's growing up maybe pretty par for the course, right? And then something happens, and very quickly that starts to ramp up. So I thought, well, let's go see. I'm a bit of a nerd, if you can't tell, by me deep diving into ketchup. Have we evolved to handle this? So I went and looked at the most recent stats that we have from Nature Genetics, volume 47, which came out in 2015. The genetic Eve. Now, this is the fun thing about where science and, you get evolutionists and creationists, and they all sort of agree on something that humans, if you go backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards in our DNA, we have something called a genetic Eve. We all sort of agree that we came from a single set of DNA somewhere. When and how that happened, but that's where you'll get a point of agreement. Basically, it says about 200,000 years ago is the latest science, and if you're a creationist and you hate my guts right now, just change that number to 10,000 and you'll be fine. In the last 200,000 years, it looks like we've had about a 7% evolution in our genes, right? Now, you don't have to be a rocket surgeon to figure out 7% over 200,000 is not a very big slope, right? If the room went up 7% over 200,000 inches, or the road went up 7% over 200,000 miles, that's really slow. We are evolving. It's just happening really, really slowly. Now, some of that in America, you see we're taller now than our European ancestors just because we eat better and we're not living in smokestacks like they did. And so that's not the kind of, we're talking at the DNA level here. My question is, I'm a little nervous about this being the scientific ramp and the inputs, the reality of our environment, that scale being different. Our environmental inputs have skyrocketed. So I'm curious, what inputs do you have that you didn't have 10 years ago? What are some examples? What's something that's true right now that gives you data during your day that wasn't true 10 years ago? Okay, social media. Got one Captain Obvious answer. Thank you, Tamian, event host. How about the other 285 people in the room? Okay, it's a smartphone. Does anybody have a smart watch? Hold your arm up if you're wearing a smartwatch. Okay, we all know that stuff's buzzing because you act like you're looking at your time. We know you're reading your email. I'm watching you do it. Every friend of mine who gets a smartwatch says, I am not going to be that person that looks at my watch all meeting, and then all meeting they're like, right? What other inputs are different in the last 10 years? So smartphones buzzing in their pockets, smartwatches buzzing on their wrists. Say it again. Alexa, which scarily is always listening. In fact, did you see the latest thing on Alexa that I'm assuming it's she, sounds like a girl on mine, right? Will start going back and answering questions you asked her a year ago she didn't know the answer to. She's remembered all of them and will start answering them, which could get really awkward depending on what you've asked your Alexa in the last year. You're going to be sitting during dinner and she's going to be like, I found the answer to that rash, or whatever. It's going to be rough. What other inputs? Google, okay. Say it again. Shared economy. Cryptocurrency. Sure. Just think about the amount of stuff that's coming at you every day. Right? The amount of information, the amount of news. If we want to nerd out on food, the amount of ingredients. The amount of things you touch and smell and feel during a day are extraordinary, and they're changing quickly. Here's where this really starts to bother me. I live distinctly in the entrepreneurship community, deep within small businesses. John and I were just talking about how many faces in the room we don't know, and that really just shows how deep we're in our own little circles. In the entrepreneur community, there's a real crisis, and it's a mental health crisis. More and more, we're seeing within the entrepreneur community a deep issue when it comes to depression, anxiety, substance abuse. And it's challenging because there are peers, there are friends. So I thought I would look up those numbers. 1 in 5 U.S. adults, that'd be someone at every one of your tables, has a diagnosed mental disorder. 1 in 5 Americans. 2 out of 5 women have a diagnosable anxiety disorder. That's 40% of all of you ladies. Something is wrong. Something's wrong if 20% of Americans are walking around with some sort of mental health issue. If 40% of you women are dealing with anxiety, diagnosable, go to the doctor, get a prescription anxiety. That's challenging. Something's off. That bothers me. And if the ramp is going like this, my kids are right behind, right? How is that affecting you? So I thought let's look at 3 areas where I think we can make a difference and make a change. And I'll see if I can relate it back to what you guys are thinking within the culture of your business. So let's just pick on 3 areas of the body. I'm this nerdy. Let's talk about the brain. We're going to talk about your stomach. And we're going to talk about your eyes. And I'll circle back to these 3. So just 3 areas I think you can walk away with. So let's dive into the brain. The one area within the brain that I think is really, really key, or the one thing I think you can walk away with here, is talking about sleep. So just if you don't know what sleep is good for, and a lot of people don't, they feel like sleep is in the way. Obviously, you needed to recover from your activity over the days. Helps you deal with reducing risk and making good decisions, reducing risk from predators. It's pretty obvious. Energy regulation. Clearly, you have less energy when you sleep. And memory consolidation. These all feel like pretty useful things in life. There's a really awesome TED Talk from the last 2 years talking about how sleep, they've just now have, and you can go watch the video footage, the functional MRI footage, of when your brain sleeps, your brain fluid works sort of like a dishwasher and pulls what's considered the plaque out of your brain, and that plaque is what everybody with Alzheimer's has a high buildup of, and they're questioning whether or not Alzheimer's is a long-term sleep disorder. Amazing TED Talk, and it's going to make you want to sleep. So I'm going to throw it out to your tables. You discuss with each other. What do you need to change to get good sleep? So let's see if we can find any consensus at your table. If I said you got to improve your sleep, what would you do at your table? Go, you got 20 seconds. Okay, let's bring it back in. Someone give me some feedback. What's an idea at your table to get better sleep? What's an idea? We sort of pride ourselves. There's some sort of, I'm 39, which makes me the oldest of the millennials, the youngest of the Gen X. There's some sort of cultural currency of like, I work so hard, I only sleep 6 hours a night. We give ourselves some sort of trophy for that. So I'm curious, what would you do to improve sleep? What's an idea that was shared at the table? Someone throw one at me.
Start giving my kids Benadryl.
Okay, Joe's going to drug his children. For somebody with 4 kids, not a bad idea. Limit your screen time, okay. Work out. Get up earlier, which assumes then maybe you're making it up by going to bed earlier. All right? Your grandparents might be onto something. Oh, your grandparents you make fun of who go to bed at 8 and get up at 4 to milk the cows, even though they haven't had cows in 60 years like mine. They're getting some good sleep. Anything else? Any other ideas? Someone said make sure you don't have sleep apnea. I can talk about that one. What was the one over here? Follow a routine. That's a really critical one. Humans are surprisingly routine-based with our cycles, and we really need to, if you go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time, you can really improve your sleep. Sleep apnea is where you stop breathing for a few seconds and then catch your breath, and it wakes you up. My father could always sleep. My father's name is Charlie Brown, if you want to remember me for the rest of the conference. we've taken care of that. And Charlie Brown had a sleep problem, and it was that he slept too much. My dad could go to sleep and 14 hours later wake up. My mom was like, that's weird, right? People shouldn't be able to do that. And then I had a client who was a Mid-America Neuroscience, their big sleep lab, and so I negotiated my dad getting a sleep study as part of my pay for some contract work. And my dad went in, and my dad was waking up every 45 seconds during the night. He was never actually going to sleep. He had sleep apnea because he would hold his breath and then and hold his breath in his sleep. And a lot of people do it. You shouldn't be able to sleep longer than 8 hours. If you think you can, go get a sleep study. You'll find out that something's off. So I watched my dad. I stayed up there all night and watched my dad wake up every 45 seconds all night, which is pretty crazy. Halfway through the night, they said, we're done with this. We're going to put you on a machine. They put a breathing machine on him. He got 2 full sleep cycles, and it was the most energetic I'd ever seen my father. It's like he had snorted cocaine when he woke up. He was like, let's go get breakfast, and I want to tour this part of Kansas City, and my dad's usually pretty chill, and he was like jacked. But he probably hadn't slept in 50 years. You should have 4 sleep cycles. You got to get some sleep. I'll tell you, as an adult, your sleep cycle is about 1 hour and 45 minutes, hour and a half if you're a little bit older, 2 hours if you're a little bit younger. You can get these awesome apps that'll help you track your sleep cycle. So, one of the things I think you should do, get a sleep app. You'll be surprised at what this does for your life. This is what a sleep app looks like. They're really simple. They don't have to touch you. You set your phone by your nightstand because you already do that. You turn it on. It listens to you breathe. It knows you're breathing versus your spouse or your dogs. I don't know how. Ask Alexa. And then it goes to a sleep cycle. This is what 4 sleep cycles look like, right? You go up, down, up, down, up, down. This is when you're turning your pillow over and getting the cold side. Okay, we're tracking here. And in the morning, it tells you your sleep quality. This is really helpful. Some of this, just the awareness of what's going on, could be really surprising to you. You might think you get great sleep, and it might go like this all night. These are all free, by the way. I'm sure there's paid ones, but that one's on Droid and iOS. Let's talk about your stomach. I'm a super nerd on this. About 10 years ago, I ran a company where we did, we talked about natural health stuff. And I wrote 18 books on natural health and had 75,000 people on my email list talking about stuff like this. Back about a decade ago, we were really into the gut-brain connection, which would have made us really nerdy back then because it's sort of just kept catching more stream here, so this matters to me. Let's talk about your stomach and bacteria, how this works. If you don't know how your stomach works, it's pretty awesome. You eat food, and it goes through this awesome chemical process. It does things like digest food. It produces vitamins. Many of you may not know that. You think you have to eat your vitamins, but there's awesome things that happen. When you eat your food, your body actually will produce other vitamins. It regulates your hormones, which is massively important for all of us, men and women. Gets rid of toxins. It'll produce some healing compounds. What goes on in your stomach is so much dictating your day. It's not even funny. And if any of you have really cleaned up your diet, you will find out how true I am about this. My nerdy friend Ross in the back would love to. Ross, can you wave your hand? Ross is so much more nerdy than he looks on diet. He would happily answer these questions for you. Let's talk about some foods that you need to cut out at your table. Pick out a couple of foods you're willing to bail on. Let's go. Okay, bring it back. It didn't seem like that one was hard. Bring it back, bring it back. Did someone just say burritos? Oh, Doritos. I'm a hardcore burrito fan. Went to Gilberto's on my way here. So we're not cutting burritos from our food option for any reason. I'll take Doritos, though. There's somewhere around 10,000 ingredients in a Dorito. Nobody knows what any of them are. It's all natural flavor, fried with natural flavor, baked in a natural flavor casing. What else do you got for food where you could just say, you know what, in all honesty, this could probably take a hike? Say it again? Junk food. Okay, that's broad, but sure. What are some junk food options? Anything fried? Maybe. Okay. Little Debbie. Oh, we all love them, but you know what? There's nothing real in there. There's a great YouTube video of a guy with a cutting torch cutting steel, and then goes over a Twinkie, and you can't burn a Twinkie with a cutting torch. Go watch it. He's like 2 minutes on a Twinkie with a 6,000-degree cutting torch. Nothing. Don't eat anything that won't burn with a cutting torch. They should cover the spaceship with Twinkies on re-entry. Think about it. Your body has the metabolism burns food. If a torch won't burn food, your body won't burn it, just as a rule of thumb. What else? Wait, sodas? Okay, I would agree with you on that one. Beer? Oh. Everyone's like, no, not beer. Oh, no. Dairy? Okay. Possibly. As you age, you need less and less dairy, or you need different forms of it. You need fermented dairy and not just like chugging the skim milk. So here's an app. I like apps. And then I'm going to turn it on its head here in a second. If you don't use MyFitnessPal, it's an awesome app. And here's the best part about it is, I don't know that I've got the screen showing it. On one of the screens, this isn't the one that shows it, but there's a little thing you click, and you can just scan your food, and it puts in all the data for you. You just click barcode, boop, scan it, done. It's super fast. And at the end of the day, it'll show you sort of like how much fat, sugar, everything. It doesn't tell you if you're healthy or not healthy. No more than the sleep tells you if you're healthy or not healthy. It just says, here's quantifiably what's going on. Most of you, I guarantee you, don't know. If you think you eat a 2,000 calorie a day diet, you're going to be quite surprised that you don't. You'll be really surprised. Some of you probably barely get 1,000, and some of you are knocking back 4,000 like you're a high school football player, right? You might be surprised. This is really helpful, too, when you go to the doctor and they go, talk to me about your diet, and then you lie to them. You wouldn't have to if you had this app. You could just show them the numbers. It does good things just showing you sort of where you regulate. I'm a big fan of knowing what's going on, right? If God gave us the iPhone, I might as well use it to make my life better. So let's go to the third one, your eyes. And then we're going to kind of tie this all together. I'm going to specifically talk about what you're consuming with your eyes with social media news. It's a little bit different than the biology of the eyes. So this one we're going to be a little bit nerdier. The volume of changes of things that you see during the day creates the pace that you feel the day's going. Have you ever had days that feel so slow? Like, let's say you go on vacation, you rent a cabin along the river, you get up and have tea, you read a book till you're bored with it, right? You decide to go get your walking shoes, you put it on, and it's only like 8:50 in the morning, right? And you're like, how is that possible? And other days you're at work and like you look down and like you've missed lunch, and it felt like it was 10 minutes, but it was 4 hours. The rate at which you're consuming information creates this pace in your brain of how fast the day's going. This matters, especially when it comes to anxiety. Okay, your reticular activating system, one of my favorite part of the whole brains, trains us to look for patterns, but it's especially good at negativity. Let me help you guys all realize what your reticular activating system is. When my first child was born, we were pregnant with our first kid. We go get a car seat, and it will not, like car seats are like this big now, and we couldn't get it in our car in the back seat. Like we couldn't, like with a running start, get it in the back of our little Toyota Corolla. So my wife's like, this isn't gonna work. So we bought a Toyota Highlander. And I did the weird thing of buying it off eBay. I rode the train from Kansas City to Santa Fe to pick it up, which was super fun, and drove it back. And in the process of driving back to my hometown at that time, which was Lawrence, Kansas, in the process of driving it back, Everybody in Lawrence, Kansas went and bought a Toyota Highlander. I'd never seen one before in my whole life. I drive back into town and they're everywhere. There must have been 20 in the parking lot the same color as mine. Has anybody ever noticed that happen? Like you don't notice that everyone's got a car until you get the car, or you don't notice everyone's got a shoes until you get the shoes. You don't notice everyone's got a Rebecca Scott purse until you get one, right? And then you find that pattern. That's your reticular activating system, part of your brain. Does two things. Wakes you up in the morning when the sun comes up and helps you find patterns. What patterns do you think you're putting into your brain as you're scrolling through your negative news in the morning about how the day is going to go? I mean, I dare you to find positive news on any news outlet scrolling through your phone. Like it's a challenge. Good luck. So you're programming yourself to enter the day really looking for negative input. Like an athlete, you're training for it. It desensitizes your sympathetic nervous system, which makes you less capable of caring. It's exhausting, I got to admit. This last week's been a doozy, right? Had a plane go down and 290 people pass away on a plane that was 2 weeks old. We had a synagogue get shot up, and how many other things? I mean, at some point, you're just like, I can't even keep up with it. Your body can't keep getting into the situation of caring, not caring, caring, not caring, caring, not caring, and at some point, it just lowers all those. Otherwise, you'd be a wreck all the time. We don't want to enter our workplace with a desensitized sympathetic nervous system. We're over-comparing ourselves to others. Go back to my grandpa. He met 150 people, he thinks, in 18 years. His ability to compare whether or not his life was as good as someone else's was pretty simple because every other kid in that town wore a white shirt, blue jeans, and black shoes because that's the only thing that store sold. He didn't know if he was doing any better or worse than anybody. He wasn't looking at anybody's Instagram feed, seeing that their life was gorgeous and curated and his wasn't. This really matters to the kiddos, and it's really affecting you all, and you may not know it. And we're constantly looking at incomplete realities. My dad had many parts of his career, but one of them was as a police officer. And I asked him, what's the first thing you walk into a house and you look for as a police officer? And guess what the first thing he said was? He's like, if all the pictures on the wall were of a happy family smiling and they're happy, 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 happy down the hallways and happy on the walls and happy in the living room, they weren't happy. Because no family's that happy all the time. It's not reality. It's a curated reality. Think of that now. Think about what's on your phone. I mean, Instagram's as curated reality as you're ever going to get of how great everybody else's life is. You're choosing to put yourself in that sort of comparison state all the time, and you're biologically not equipped to not have that impact you. So, one more question at your table. What app do you need to check less? Go. Okay, let's bring it back in. Let's get some ideas. Give me some ideas on apps that you need to check less. Anybody? Work email. God bless you, just hit that delete button and get rid of that. I'll tell you, one time I had surgery, had a bunch of emails. I was working for a very successful man out of Seattle. I came back and was like, oh my gosh, my email situation is horrific. He's like, just delete all. Just delete all, and anybody who wants to get a hold of you will call you because they were wondering why you didn't respond. So I did. I just deleted them all. I was just like, click 100, delete, click 100, delete, click 100, delete. I think I got 3 phone calls. So, yeah, email. What else? Instagram. Okay. Snapchat. I'll be honest, there's not very many good things that come from Snapchat. Any others? Let me give you a way to sort of wrestle with this. Now on the new iOS, it will tell you how long you're in different social platforms, so you can swipe up and then, well, that's my timer. And if you swipe to the left, it will now total your time for each day and said you spent 2 hours in social media apps, you spent 45 minutes in productivity apps, so it'll give you sort of a sense. If you're spending a lot of time playing games like this, it'll sort of add it up for you. It doesn't tell you, hey, act different, it's not your mom. It just adds it up. If you're a Droid user, you can get app detox. You can say, hey, on Facebook, I only want to use it for 30 minutes. On Google or Twitter, Google Plus is gone now, but Twitter, I only want to use it for this amount of time, and it can help you sort of regulate those. You know, if you were a pro athlete and you had to get ready to do your professional thing the next day or the next week, you would prep for it with quite a strict regiment of activities, right? You would think about it and say, I've got to show up to this event and be ready. We did a lot of prep for us presenters. We do a lot of prep for something like this. We think about it for days and weeks and prep, and the night before we have this whole ritual, and we were up here early, and we get ready. But we just sort of get up and go to work and expect that it's all going to work. I've got a theory, and I think that's the amount of inputs you're giving yourself and allowing yourself to experience every day through simple things like diet, sleep, and maybe your apps is impacting what you experience at work. How much of what you perceive regarding workplace culture is impacted by the culture within? Raina just talked about this a little bit. What you're bringing to the office, you're training using what we just talked about. Your diet, your sleep, your phone, just for 3 simple examples. You're training to enter your workplace with a certain attitude, a certain disposition. Isn't it funny how when in certain workplaces, like I sometimes have to go in and do some consulting with groups, and so let's say you guys are a team, and one of you will be like, oh, the workplace culture here is so enriching, I love it. And another one of you will be like, this place is like hell. And it's like, you're in the same cubicles, right? You're on the same wing. So something is individually being brought to the table when one of you hates it and one of you loves it. I would encourage you to challenge yourself and say, what are you bringing to your culture? The culture you're perceiving is often the one you're creating. And how are you prepping as you go into it? I got 2 things for you I'll leave you with. 1, these are the only 2 things you're in charge of, your attitude and your actions. I don't care what you think you're in charge of in life, but you're probably just in charge of these 2. Give this to your kids. Say, look, you want to be in charge? You are the president and CEO of these 2 things, your attitude and your actions. If you find yourself always finding faults in your workplace or your coworkers, sort of like Raina talked about, you might write that list down, call your mom and see if that list is about you. You're probably just really good at identifying them because you're the expert. Keep this in check. If you would commit every day to show up to your team and be in charge of your attitude, if you would prep your sleep amazingly, if you would try to get some sleep for your team's benefit. I like to run. I went on a long run on Saturday with a good friend. She's training for a marathon. I don't know why I told my friends I would help them train for a marathon, but one of them called me and asked, at mile 15, she says, I'm not feeling so great, right? Okay, well, it's mile 15. Nobody's feeling great at mile 15. She said, I got a headache. And I said, that's from one thing, dehydration at this mileage. You either didn't drink enough yesterday or you also drank alcohol. And she said, both. And I said, a 20-mile run is the end of a 24-hour preparation, or end of a 48 hours of preparation. It's not the second thing on your Saturday to-do list. It's the last thing on your last 24-hour to-do list. You've already prepped for your work Monday on Sunday. So when you get to work on Monday and it's a shit show, you created that monster on Sunday with your choices. When you binged on Netflix season 2 because Halloween's coming up, or Stranger Things season 2, because you had to catch up because it's Halloween, and you stayed up till 2 in the morning eating Doritos, right? Now you fessed up. We all know. We got it on camera. You created that Monday. Your actions. You're in charge of what you bring there. 2 last things, and I'll get off stage. It's turned yellow on me. That's bad. Things are about to happen to me. If you're my age or older and you played with computers, you would know this term. Garbage in, garbage out. This was on my monitors. I was the right age where I had computers all the way through in school. And my teachers would always say, garbage in, garbage out. You program bad code, you get bad programs. Garbage in, garbage out. Your body works a lot the same way. Look at your G.I. when you get home. And grace. This is something we need a lot more in the workplace, and you need a lot more for yourself. Grace. Sort of giving you unmerited favor. I'm going to be nice to you not because you earned it, but because you're a human. Right? I'm sorry you stayed up all night eating Doritos, watching Stranger Things 2. But I'm going to be nice to you. I'm sorry you stayed up drinking when we're on a 15, 20-mile run, but I'm going to extend you some grace. And I'm going to extend myself some grace. When I don't make the right decisions, I don't show up, I have a sucky attitude, I have poor actions. I'm going to give myself some grace. Guys, I appreciate my time with you. Can't wait for the question and answer period.
Konnichiwa.